Hey guys, welcome to my first drive video on BMW's brand new M240i xDrive Coupe. I've been dying to get my hands on this car. It really is shaping up to be a very exciting little package. It has very little resemblance compared to BMW's current 1 Series and 2 Series Grand Coupe. Both of those models are based on the Mini platform, so fundamentally a front-wheel drive architecture. Whereas this 2 Series Coupe is based on the current 3 Series and 4 Series platforms, so fundamentally a rear-wheel drive platform. And although this flagship M240i is an xDrive system, it still sends most of that power and torque to the rear axle. So it should feel very similar to the current M240i xDrive setup or the M240i xDrive setup, both of which I'm very familiar with and I really like, especially in slippery conditions. They almost feel rear-wheel driven until you really need that front axle and then it gets you out of trouble. So a really good setup for the UK climate. Under the bonnet, the heart of the M240i is the familiar and mighty B58, a 3-litre straight-six turbocharged unit producing 374 horsepower and 500 newton meters of torque. That is connected to the brilliant ZF 8-speed gearbox, similar to what I have in my M3. So I'm interested to see what that feels like paired up to this engine in this car with the xDrive system. BMW claim this M240i xDrive will do the 0 to 62 sprint in just 4.3 seconds. We'll test that out shortly. In terms of styling, well, overall, I really like the way the new 2 Series Coupe looks, especially this flagship M240i xDrive. I'm not so keen around the rear end, which we'll look at shortly, but the front end is really nice. I like the vertical grills. It's an intelligent grille now, so that opens and closes depending on how much the engine needs to breathe. I love all the strong and angular lines. I wasn't sold on the headlights when I first saw them in images, but the more time I spend with this car and the more I see it in the flesh, I really do like the front end of the car. We've got a power dome on the bonnet there, which I've been told is to shorten the appearance of the nose of the car. And actually, the front end or the nose of this car almost arguably looks better than, say, the one on my M3 that does look quite long and slender. This one looks a bit more muscular. So I'm really excited to see the incoming M2 as well, based off this car. My favourite angle of this new 2 Series Coupe is the side profile. I love the proportions of the rear wing, the door and the front wing. It reminds me very much of the original 3-litre CSL. Yes, it's not that beautiful, but there's just something about it that harps back to that car. I love this line that continues all the way along across the door and onto the bonnet. And I actually really like the alloys. These are the standard 19-inch alloys that come on the flagship M240i. But perhaps what's more important is the rubber that wraps these alloys. BMW have fitted Michelin's brilliant PS4S tyre, which regulars will know is my absolute favourite all-round high-performance tyre. And in fact, the fronts are up to 245 profile and the rears are at 255. So a lot wider front and rear than the outgoing M240i, and in fact very similar to my M2 competition. That has 245 on the front as well and 265 on the back, so slightly wider rubber on the rear. Something else I'm not the biggest fan of is these M door mirror caps. Well, they look great, but I really think that BMW should reserve these style door mirrors for real full fat M cars, not M lights. It's funny, BMW have had a lot of controversial styling over the past couple of years, but most of that has been around their grills on the front end of the car. The new 2 Series Coupe, well, I'm really not that excited about the rear end. We saw some sketches today of the concept car and that looked mega. I just can't get used to this. It looks to me like a sad face. Okay, jumping inside, well, it all feels very familiar. Really good driving position, much better than the M240i Grand Coupe I tried a bit earlier on today. Feels very much like my M3, obviously without the carbon buckets that do give you a slightly lower driving position, but I would be having no issues sitting in here with a helmet on, for instance. It feels really good, really nice and low, which is what you'd expect on a car that's based on the current 3 and 4 Series platform. The fit and finish in here, well, it's really hard to tell it apart from the 3 and 4 Series. I've got the operating system 7 in here, and as far as I can tell, everything looks very, very similar. This center console, almost identical. I'm sure there are some cheaper plastics around, maybe a bit lower down, like here. The main difference between this and, say, the current 4 Series Coupe is the door cards themselves. They're very different, and they actually have some lighting elements inside. As this is a 2 Series, it's set out to appeal to a younger audience, but I'm not offended by them. And actually, when you fire the car up for the first time, they sort of light up and do a little bit of a light display, which I'm sure looks really good late at night. So in terms of cabin quality, really nice. I haven't tried to get in the back seats, but it looks quite cramped back there, similar to the current 4 Series. And really, this is 2 adults, 2 children, maybe 2 teenagers at a push. You could get 4 adults in here, but you would be cramped in the front and in the back. At time of launch in the UK, there'll be 3 2 Series Coupes to choose from. The base one, the 220i, which will retail at about £35,000 on the road. Then you've got the 220d, which will retail at about 37 grand. And then you have this flagship M240i xDrive, which is going to retail at £46,000. There will be a 230i, which will join the lineup a bit later on next year, and that's probably going to cost around £40,000. But before you start going mad in the comments section, attacking me and BMW, 46 grand for a 2 Series that's not an M2, that's madness. Well, it's not really in today's world. When you look at something like a Golf R with a few options, well, that's 45 grand. In fact, the one that I had at the beginning of this year, that was 45 grand on the nose, and this car comes with a lot of standard equipment. And those standard options include the 19-inch alloy wheels we looked at on the outside of the car, adaptive LED headlamps, leather and electric front seats, and these are the sport seats that are the same as the ones that are in the M240i Coupe. Really nice, really comfortable, not as supportive as the buckets that are in my M3, but as a standard seat they're really, really nice. Front and rear parking sensors, cruise control, 3-zone climate, sun protection glass, and an M differential on the rear axle. So that's all standard equipment on top of all of the rest of the standard equipment that comes on the other 2 Series Coupe models. So you could buy one of these as a base car and not really want to add much more to it, apart from the adaptive suspension, which we'll get onto once we take it out on the road. First things first, let's test out this car's acceleration figures. BMW claim it will do the 0 to 62 sprint in just 4.3 seconds. Conditions outside are close to perfect. I've got the traction in traction mode, which enables me to use the launch control. My race box is ready. Left foot is hard down on the brake, right foot on the accelerator. Launch control active, here we go. Wow, it's so fast off the line, and there we go. 3.79 seconds. That's half a second quicker than BMW claim. That is to 60 miles an hour, mind, so we can add a tenth to that, but that's still 0.4 of a second quicker than BMW claim. And that's way quicker than my M2 competition could get, and even a DCT version of my, let's call it previous shape M2 competition could do. I I've knocked everything back into comfort, so the adaptive suspension, which is optional on this model, is now in its softest setting. The throttle response is fairly lazy feeling. The gearbox, well, it's slowing through the gears at low speeds. But that is perhaps the most important setting for this car, because I think the average M240i xDrive Coupe owner is going to want this car to perform really well as a daily tool, and that's what the previous M240i did very, very well. And in fact, the M135i and the M140i, they are brilliant daily propositions, but when you found your best road on a Sunday morning, they turned into mini M cars, if you like. And I can report that this car in comfort is just effortless. It's such an easy car to live with. We've already talked about how nice the interior is, how premium it feels in here. We get all of the bang up to date infotainment systems, the operating system 7, and you're not really left feeling shortchanged in here at all. It feels really, really nice. And that's the same when we're talking about the ride quality. But remember, this car has the adaptive suspension option, so I don't know what the passive setup will be like in a non-option car, if you like. The gearbox, well, it just works seamlessly. The throttle response, even in this fairly lethargic mode, is really good. You know there's a lot under the bonnet. You know you can feel that torque building from very low RPMs, but it's not urging you to go fast all the time like my M2 competition is. That car's not very happy at slower speeds and around town because it constantly wants its arse kicked, whereas this particular car is very happy to just cruise around. And I can imagine in 8th gear on the motorway, you're probably easily going to get 40 miles to the gallon. We've talked about what this car is like in comfort and as a daily, but what you probably want to know is what it's like when you start pushing on. So let's put it into Sport Plus, knock this over, pull a paddle so we have manual gears, and put my foot down a little bit. Well, I'm not going to keep it a secret that this car is very, very good. I was expecting it to have a front end similar to my M3, and it is similar. It's not as good. I mean, the front tyres, although they're 245 section, the ones on my M3 are 275, so you're already lacking some of that mechanical grip. But it stays so composed, it feels so good, it inspires you with confidence everywhere. Front end is just mighty, and the acceleration, well, we already know the acceleration. It will do 0 to 60 in well under 4 seconds, so it's definitely fast enough as a road car, but it feels a lot more than that. And the more time I've spent behind the wheel of it today, well, the more I've kind of fallen for it. It's just epic, it really is. And yes, you're going to expect that for a car that's almost £50,000, but it really does tick so many boxes. It's hard to believe where I'm sitting now is the same seat that I was in 5 minutes ago when I had everything knocked back to comfort, because in comfort it's just so smooth and easy going, and it doesn't feel like it's going to transform into this A and B road basher. It really is cool. And the sounds it produces, although muted, obviously we're in 2021 and there's so many restrictions, etc., it does sound pretty good from in here. And I'm sure there are some fake sounds, but I'll tell you what, I'm not too opposed to them. They sound pretty good. And between upshifts, just like on that M240i Grand Coupe I tried recently, on upshifts you get a lovely sort of burp, I guess you'd call it, similar to a DSG burp, but classier. Really cool. Listen to this, that second gear pull. Is that real? I'm not sure. I don't know if that's being piped around the cabin, but most importantly, it sounds good and it adds some character to this car. There's no mistaking that that is a straight 6 that I'm listening to either, underneath that glorious bonnet that has a lovely sort of M dome on it. It really is the full package, this car. And then you look in your door mirrors and you see those lovely flared rear arches. It just looks really good, and it's going to be hard to justify or understand what the new incoming M2 is going to be like. That B58, I know I go on about it like a broken record, but it's just so good. It really is. I honestly think it's a better unit lower down than the S58, which should be its bigger brother, the one that's in my M3 and the current M4. It just has so much torque down low. I believe it's maximum torque from 1900 RPM, which makes it a really usable engine in everyday life and great on your favourite road. Although I've got 8 gears to play with, I can be caught out in a slightly higher gear, like I am now in 5th, up this rather steep climb, put my foot down. In fact, I can feel the rear end wanting to rotate. That's how much torque there is. Yeah, there's no doubting that this car is rear wheel drive biased, as in it sends most of its power and torque to the rear axle. I can feel that straight away, and I'm sure in wet weather on a second gear hairpin you'll really see the benefit of the front axle coming into play. But on faster flowy stuff like this, it's just epic. It really is. I'm so glad that it's a great car. I have so much history and love for these M lights. I mean, let's face it, they really kick-started my channel back in end of 2013, 2014, along with obviously my amazing audience that have supported me for many years. But those cars back then, the original M135i and 235i, epic cars. And yes, the M240i is brilliant as well, but there's been a few M-like duds along the way, and I kind of thought that maybe this car would be a bit soulless, but it really isn't. It doesn't have the best steering feel in the world, a bit like my M3. And yes, it would be great if you could buy it in a manual option, but there was no chance of that happening. In fact, I think you couldn't buy a manual M240 for a couple of years towards the end of its production line. This is a sharp little corner. Let's just tip it in. There you go. The rear axle does all the work, and then you feel the front end kicking in. This would be great around a tight little circuit. It just has so much ability and so much grip. Such a fantastic little car. Have I already mentioned that it's a great little car? I do wonder to myself though, what's the M2 going to be like if this is this good? I mean, do we need any more power and pace and grip and poise? It's just for the road. Maybe this is going to be the better option. Maybe this will be the better proposition to live with. It's certainly a lot better as an overall package compared to my M2 competition. Don't get me wrong, the M2 comp on a track or on your outright favourite road is going to be more entertaining and still probably ultimately a bit faster if the weather's dry. But everywhere else, I mean, well, in terms of cabin luxury, tech, comfort, and just usability, this car has really moved the game on. So fair play to BMW. Let's just enjoy this bit of road. I've actually got to head back to BMW Press and drop this car off and jump on a plane in a few hours time. But I'm really glad that I got the opportunity to come over here on the global launch effectively and actually drive this car before the embargo, so I can launch this video along with all of the big guns. Give me a bit of a chance to get some views, etc. And I really appreciate everyone's support, I really do. As I've talked about so many times, without you lot, well, I wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be doing this. And I love bringing you along for the journey, I really do, especially when it's a car that I enjoy. This is This is a brilliant, brilliant little car. It really, really is. Brakes are good as well. Brakes are really good. It's got such a stable front axle that obviously the brakes then become very good. Again, like my M3, you can really lean on them if you want. Plenty of traction there and plenty of stability, which is really important. I actually think this car would be pretty good on track, and that's where the old M lights kind of faded away a bit. When you took them out onto track and you pushed them to their limits, that's when you discovered that they weren't full M cars. But this, or as far as I can tell on the road anyway, it's far more capable, and I'm sure it'd feel really good out on track, especially as it's got an M differential on the rear axle as standard. Guys, thanks so much for watching this first drive video on the brand new M240i xDrive. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. I will see you at another video very, very soon. Take it easy.